Welcome to Shooting Straight with A1F.com. I'm Frank Miniter, the editor-in-chief of the NRA's America's First Freedom. Today we're here with Charles Cooke. He's a contributor to America's First Freedom. And Charlie, I've got a pretty tough question to begin here with. I had you do a back page on this because it just stuck out at me that some gun control groups, some other far-left groups, you note the ACLU, have this massive contradiction in that they want more gun control laws, more gun bans, and so on, yet they only want them selectively enforced, though they don't even articulate it that cleanly. How would you lay out what's going on here?
Well, as you said, there's a paradox. On the one hand, you have a movement that is institutionally committed to reducing the number of guns in private hands and passing all sorts of draconian laws to achieve that. And on the other hand, it thinks that the laws we have in the United States are irretrievably bigoted, that the people who would be charged with enforcing them are violent racists, and that no one within their hierarchy of victims can ever get a fair shake within the system. And so what you end up with is the call for more laws and then an outcry if those laws are enforced. Now, obviously, this is not a particular paradox for those of us who want to see every American who wishes to exercise his unalienable right to bear arms. And we would say, let's not have these laws. And yes, at points in American history, laws against gun ownership have been applied unfairly, have been unjustly targeting minorities, especially African Americans. Well, the left can't do that, so it ends up in a tangle. I think the obvious answer to it is that an awful lot of people within the gun control movement and the progressive movement that has taken it over just have stopped thinking outside of buzzwords. I mean, their answer to every question now is race. And as a result, they're answering two questions that are at odds with one another with the same answer. And they're unwilling to acknowledge the problem that creates. There are a few exceptions. For example, with the Bruen case, the Supreme Court's considering at the moment, which is the concealed carry case in New York. Some progressive activists filed amicus briefs with the court saying, look, if we're going to have this sort of law, it's going to disproportionately affect my clients, so let's get rid of it. But by and large, we're seeing this ridiculous approach that says we need lots of gun control laws, we just can't enforce them. And I think it's because when you give up on actually looking at issues and trying to be consistent for this weird, woke, identity politics obsessed way of seeing the world, you tangle yourself into knots.
It's interesting. The Atlantic, that now far left magazine, actually had a think piece on this. So there's some awareness on the left about it. And it must have shocked them, right? You note that the one of the friend of the court briefs in the Bruen case from Black Attorneys of Legal Aid and the Bronx Defenders and other public defender organizations wrote that for our clients, and this is to the Supreme Court, for our clients, New York's licensing regime renders the Second Amendment a legal fiction. And then it goes on to say, New York enacted its firearm licensing requirements to criminalize gun ownership by racial and ethnic minorities. That remains the effect of its enforcement by police and prosecutors today. So parts of the left note this contradiction, and it's a fissure going on that's kind of breaking, I don't know if it's breaking them apart, but it's certainly leading to confusion, intellectual confusion in the gun control community.
Yeah, there's also an unwillingness here, I think, to deal with the consequences of one's actions. If you want to have a law, you have to accept that that law will ultimately be enforced with violence. If we want to have taxes, then government agents, eventually government agents who are armed, will enforce those tax laws. If we want to have laws against assault, then ultimately they will be enforced with violence. If we want to have control of our border, then ultimately it will be enforced with violence. That's what a law is. Now, you obviously want to have humane people in law enforcement. Most of them are. But we do not give people a choice in this country as to whether or not they comply with the law. So you have two choices. You either accept that, and then you only pass laws in the areas that you're prepared to back up with violence, or you try and have it both ways. And the sort of classical liberal or small c conservative or libertarian approach is to say, yeah, we want to have some laws. We don't want people to hurt each other. We don't want people to cheat each other. And we're prepared to back them up. But we don't want laws governing most stuff. We'll leave people free. Or you can have an approach that says we'll pass laws for everything. But if you're going to do that, you need to deal with the consequences of that. And I just see a total unwillingness at the moment in the gun control movement to accept that if you pass laws regulating the exercise of a constitutional right that is enjoyed by tens of millions, maybe 100 million people, then you're going to have results that you don't like. And instead of just saying, as we have, okay, we shouldn't have laws in that area beyond the basics, they're trying to have it both ways.
Yeah, as I watched the Bruen case, the hearing before the Supreme Court in the Bruen case, New York State Solicitor General, her arguments, I was astounded because she made it very clear that she thought certain people should have the right to have bodyguards and guns and self-defense, but those common folk, those regular people, well, you just can't give them those rights because they'll shoot each other or something, according to her point of view, which becomes ridiculous really fast, especially when you realize, as any person should, that this is a part of the U.S. Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment. We all have the right to keep and bear arms, which she was arguing somehow against by saying, well, the elitists only should have this particular right.
Yeah, and in the political realm, the person who is the most incoherent on this, to the point at which I laugh sardonically every time I hear her on it, is Cori Bush. Is a representative from Missouri. Now, Cori Bush is one of the few people who still will openly say, yes, we should defund the police. The Democratic Party has backed off this a bit because it's recognized how unpopular it is, but Cori Bush has not. And so she will say emphatically, we need to defund the police and we need to do it now. And she doesn't even use any euphemism. She doesn't, when you push her, mean that we should redirect funds or add different sorts of police or put healthcare. She means actually get rid of the police. Cori Bush also spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on private security. And here's the best part. If anyone asks Cori Bush why, she says, why shouldn't I? Do you want me to die? No, I don't want Cori Bush to die. In fact, that's the very opposite of what I want. I want Cori Bush, much as I disagree with her, to have a long and healthy life, preferably outside of Congress, and to keep her safety intact. It's just that I want to extend that privilege to everyone else as well. And I don't understand how you can simultaneously say, I need hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend on private security. What do you want me to die? And be trying to get rid of the security that almost everyone else in America who doesn't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend enjoys, namely the police. I can only conclude, and I don't want to be overly rhetorical here, but I can only conclude that Cori Bush thinks she's more important than everyone else, that there's something special about her life and not about everyone else's who either relies on the police or who relies on the private ownership of arms for their protection.
I wish it was just her, but unfortunately it's not. It's a lot of the elitist left. It's Bloomberg and so on. In fact, former mayor, New York City Mayor de Blasio cut $1 billion in 2020 out of the police budget in New York City. And I mean, surprise, surprise, crime went up and the cops weren't out there enforcing.
And Senator Warnock in Georgia, who's up for re-election this year, is another one who talks about making it more difficult to carry a gun and even to own a gun, but has private security. And I find this astonishing. I mean, clearly, if Senator Warnock calls up his security firm, again, I don't begrudge him having it. It's his right. He's a free man. And says, hi, I've got an event in an hour. I would like you to help me. They show up. That's how quickly things can change. You should not rely upon that sort of quick turnaround and then want long waiting periods and training requirements and hoops to jump through for everyone else who might find themselves in a situation quite quickly where they need to defend themselves too. And I think really this goes back to your original question, which is, how do they keep these two ideas in their minds? And the answer is that they don't think about it particularly clearly. The good news is that it seems that Americans of all races, men and women in all regions, are beginning to do so for them. And they're buying guns, they're taking courses, they're getting concealed carry permits. In a lot of states, that they don't even need those concealed carry permits anymore, so that they're just carrying without them, and they're bypassing these people who aren't thinking the matter through.
In 25 states now.
Yeah.
God bless them. But not thinking is absolutely what's happening, including our president, President Joe Biden, in his State of the Union address, not blaming criminals or these changes in law and so on, the defunding of the police for the rising crime rates, but instead blaming gun stores and gun manufacturers to the tune of saying he called on Congress to repeal the liability shield, as he called it, that makes gun manufacturers the only industry in America that can't be sued. That's a lie on its face. Even the Washington Post, I mean, hardly a pro-gun group, has called that false.
Joe Biden lies about guns every time he speaks about guns, and it's actually somewhat alarming to watch because Joe Biden has to have been corrected in every single lie that he tells about guns over and over again over the last 50 years he spent in public office, and he still says them. I mean, some of them are more frivolous. He says, you're not allowed a cannon. Well, actually, you are. Some of them are really serious, such as the one you're describing, which is his attack on the lawful protection, I forget, the PLCAA, which essentially holds that, you can sue a gun manufacturer if the gun that you buy is faulty, but you can't sue a gun manufacturer if it's used by a criminal. Joe Biden voted against this law, fine, but he has lied about why ever since. What he says is that the gun industry is the only industry in the United States that is not allowed to be sued. It's just not true. There was a reason that this law was passed, and there was a reason that a lot of non-gun industry groups sided with the bill when it was being debated. And that is that there are people in this country who want to achieve through the courts what they can't achieve at the ballot box or because of the Second Amendment. There are people who are trying to get rogue judges to rule that certain firearms should be illegal under vague consumer protection standards, or what you will. And as that famous Vermonter Bernie Sanders has said, this is a bit like saying that you could sue a hardware store if somebody attacks you with a hammer that they bought there. It's utterly preposterous. The gun industry is subject to the same regulations as is any other industry. If your Ford F-150 has a problem with its brakes and you drive it into a crowd, Ford can be sued for negligence. If a terrorist drives a Ford F-150 into a crowd, of course Ford can't be, because there's no culpability. And the same thing applies to guns. And the reason it was specific to guns back in 2005 when it passed was because, unlike in most other industries, there's a whole organization base out there that's trying to use the courts to do this and occasionally succeeding. So Joe Biden knows this, but this is a lie that is very popular among a certain sort of anti-gun politician. Hillary Clinton said it over and over again in 2015, 2016 during the presidential election. And no doubt whoever succeeds Joe Biden in his current position as Democratic Party leader will as well.
Well, perhaps the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act just needed a better name so we could help people understand this.
Yeah.
Because, that's our job. The NRA and America's First Freedom is we try to explain these issues very simply, cleanly. I mean, anyone who goes and reads that bill, it's only a couple of pages long. It's not Obamacare, right? It's not thousands of pages. It's a couple of pages long. And it very clearly states firearms manufacturers, dealers, they can be sued if they break a law, if they sell a faulty product, and so on. They're just being protected from third-party actions by some criminal who uses one potentially illegally. That's it. But we'll have to keep trying. So Charlie, tell me, where can people find you, read more?
I write at National Review pretty much every day. And I have a Twitter account, twitter.com/Charles C.W. Cooke, or my website, which is charlescwcooke.com.
Thanks, Charlie.
I appreciate it.